It's that time of year again when the national budget will be unveiled in just a few days on October 18th. What priorities will be established in the 2025 budget to enhance the economic welfare of the Rakyat? How can the upcoming budget address rising costs while also fostering business growth and improving livelihoods across Malaysia? I'm Azaria Tagaya and this is Money Matters. Hello there, good evening and welcome to your favorite channel TV3, which you can also stream on Tonton. Today we have Bank Muamalat Malaysia Berhad's Chief Economist, Dr. Mohd Afzanizam Abdul Rashid with me right here in the studio. Hello Doctor, welcome to Money Matters.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you, always a familiar face. It's always good to see you and have you here on Money Matters to talk about, well this time it's the 2025 budget. It's the buzzword, it's starting to become the buzzword now as we inch towards October 18th. And if we take a look at the news, Doctor, the Prime Minister has been focusing on reducing the influence of cartels. So given this sort of outlook looking forward, what concrete steps should be included in the 2025 budget in order to effectively reduce the cost of essential goods for consumers?
Yeah, it's interesting you brought that up in terms of cartel. I think that's a signal that the markets in the goods and services industries are having some issues. There are some form of efficiencies whereby it leads to some form of, perhaps these cartel activities that have been prevailing for quite some time. And therefore, I think it's only right for the government to really look into this matter seriously, and therefore perhaps it could revolve around areas relating to enforcement, and looking for, or identify areas that can lead to these cartel activities that actually can, distort the prices actually. So it resulted, in inefficiencies. It resulted in rigidity in the price itself. So it's hard for us to see prices to be flexible. So on that note, I think perhaps for the budget 2025, the focus is perhaps to allocate more resources for the enforcement agencies, so that they may have more means to go and enforce the relevant regulation and laws, so that these crimes can be curbed.
Yeah, excellent. Now, Doctor, on that note, looking at the bigger picture, with Malaysians feeling the pinch of rising costs right now, despite low inflation rates, how can the government actually balance fiscal policies to manage the economy at the same time, without hampering economic growth for the country?
Right. I think we need to be very clear about what is inflation and what is cost of living. Inflation essentially is the rate of change in prices, so we will see this percentage sign. For last year, for instance, our inflation has been trending downwards to around 2.5% from 3.3% from the previous years. Yes, inflation is trending down, but it doesn't mean prices are going down. No. What it means is that the increment of these prices has been slowed, has been moderated, and thanks to the monetary policies which is being administered by the Bank Negara, which saw that the rise in OPR from 1.75% in 2022 to 3% in 2023. So you can see that this moderation in inflation starts to emerge. So on that note, I think the government has, especially the central bank has showed their credibility in containing inflation. But cost of living is the actual price that we pay. So I think, yes, I think prices are going up. So the typical the common measures being implemented by way of introducing subsidies, introducing cash transfers. So these cash transfers would help to elevate their purchasing power, especially for the low-income group. So these, I would say, these would be the common measures that will be announced in the upcoming budget next week.
So you're foreseeing that we'll see more of that in the upcoming budget announcement?
Right. Because I think essentially the government has enacted subsidy rationalizations, so that would allow them to have some fiscal space, which can be redirected towards perhaps in the immediate terms to have more direct cash transfers to the needy.
All right, Doctor. Well, that's very interesting. We'll see if that is the case when the budget is announced soon. Well, more on what to expect in the 2025 budget when we return after this break. But before that, let's hear about the key items topping the wish list for this year's budget. Stay tuned.
FMM's key proposals include accelerated capital allowance for AI and robotics, a ringgit 600 million digitalization grant to support smart factory transformation of 3,000 companies, tax incentives for Industry 4.0 adoption, and AI-focused education initiatives. To meet net zero goals, the manufacturing sector seeks incentives for green technology and sustainable practices, including a ringgit 2 billion ESG fund. The sector also calls for the Government Procurement Act to be expedited to support transparency and a level playing field for all, trade promotion initiatives, and a conducive business environment. Given Malaysia's tight fiscal space, FMM firmly believes that the revival of the Goods and Services Tax, GST, with modifications and a lower rate at 4% is a timely lifeline to address the country's debt challenges and build fiscal buffers to weather future economic downturns.
Government must play an important role in strengthening price control and through monitoring. And of course, the second one will be we are too dependent on import bill and imported foods, and this is where the government must look into how we can reduce our import bill and boosting food security in local production. Then of course we need to look into government's role in delivering their safety net through PADU system, and by providing subsidies for B40 and certain M40 will of course cushion the impact of cost of living for this category of consumers. And we would like to see definitely the government's improvement through healthcare sector, through of course the government's WHO's recommendation for healthcare spending is 6%, and of course if government can increase healthcare spending to 6% of GDP, will of course definitely will see increase in better healthcare infrastructure, equipment, and medication access.
Welcome back to the show. Bank Muamalat Malaysia Berhad's Chief Economist, Dr. Mohd Afzanizam Abdul Rashid, is here with me in the studio this week, and we're talking about the 2025 budget. Well, Doctor, before the break, we talked about some of the fiscal policies that the government can take. Now we're taking a look at how the 2025 budget could propose some initiatives to strengthen the social safety nets for the vulnerable populations. And also, at the same time, how might community programs help in this respect?
Right. I think, like I mentioned earlier on, cash transfers has always been instrumental in managing the social safety nets, especially for the vulnerable groups.
Yeah.
And thus far, the requirements for the cash transfers programs has always been hinges upon the level of income, the size of a household and whatnot. But I think going forward, perhaps some refinement needs to be done because what we want eventually, at some point in the future, the recipient of this cash transfers program would actually come down.
Yeah.
Simply because our education policies become so successful in producing more talented people, which can garner more salaries and wages, which can elevate them and escape from this poverty trap.
Indeed.
So those are the aspirations. So on that note, I think perhaps the condition should be imposed. I mean, can be proposed now, I would say. Perhaps those families who's been getting all this financial aid from the governments must ensure that their kids will go to schools, get a better education and whatnot. So I think what we want to see, the process of social outward mobility will be there. So perhaps imposing certain conditions before receiving more aids going forward, perhaps will nudge them, the families, towards a betterment of their economically.
Indeed, that's wonderful that you mentioned that, Doctor, because that is the hope that we are more or less moving towards that goal.
Right.
But in terms of addressing the income disparities among Malaysians, which at the moment is still quite evident.
Right.
So what steps can the 2025 budget actually take in this respect, and what kind of policies would actually help in addressing the income, boost wages for the people, but at the same time ensure that businesses also remain sustainable?
Right, right. I think from empirical standpoint, from the empirical research standpoint, we always see there's a positive effect between, the higher the GDP growth would result in lower income inequality. The higher in terms of the FDI would actually reduce income disparity. More trade openness could actually result in better income, better wealth distribution on that score. So I think on that note, I think to ensure that the economy will be able to grow with quality is something that we need to aspire.
Yeah.
And thus far, I think consumption has always been the main driver, but perhaps what we want is to have more investments, more capacity building among our firms, more employments of high-skilled workers. So these are the areas that needs to be looked at, and I think the government has been doing it, and perhaps we want more of this. So I think the budget 2025 can actually focus on incentives that can incentivize corporates to or businesses to employ more high-skilled workers. So that would mean to upgrade themselves and not just relying on a low-cost business model.
Indeed, indeed. That's wonderful, Doctor. Well, more to talk after this, but it's time for us to go for another short break. And with the 2025 budget just around the corner, we're wondering what aspirations and demands are emerging from the various sectors. Watch this.
Firstly, we do hope that the government will increase funds and provide more grants for travel agents, especially tourism operators and tourism trade associations, enabling them to organize more travel-related activities, both regionally and abroad, in our bid to attract foreign tourist arrivals. The government should also initiate innovation grants to help private sector stakeholders become more competitive, especially in the digital space. Secondly, we are also hoping that the government will reinitiate the tax exemption for tour operators, where travel agents and tour operators are exempt from tax in respect of income that is derived from the business of operating such tours.
Currently, the double tax deduction relief is given to employers that employ employees earning 4,000 and below per month. MEF hopes that this capping of 4,000 be removed and be applicable to all kinds of employment for the senior citizens. MEF hopes that the 2025 budget will provide some relief on the issue of insurance coverage for the senior citizens.
For Budget 2025, SME Malaysia first wish that government should not consider remove of the RON 95 subsidy. Number two, to help SME into more export promotion due to the implementation of RCEP and CPTPP, that for our proposal, we hope government can consider for the Matric MDG grant to increase from current 300,000 to 500,000 per company. Thirdly, we hope government should bring back or consider implementing Harmony SST or bring back GST so that they can increase the government fund indirectly to help and getting more incentive for the SME into digitization or automation for them to be more competitive. Especially now, we are facing global challenges, especially, and also many foreign companies, they have been coming into our territory. On ESG, we hope that government could work with either association or work with HRD Corp to come out with certain form of fundamental training, a fundamental class or ESG 101 to make SME understand clearly their role and how to embrace ESG to make themselves more sustainable into the implementation of the ESG compliances that may affect them in the longer term.
Thanks for staying with us. You're still with me, Azaria Tagaya, and we're still joined by Bank Muamalat Malaysia Berhad's Chief Economist, Dr. Mohd Afzanizam Abdul Rashid, in the studio this week, and we're talking about the 2025 budget. Now, Doctor, before the break, we touched a little bit on the vulnerable communities in Malaysia and how the government can actually help them through the budget tabling. But in terms of, let's elaborate more on that. In terms of the social assistance given, what reforms could the 2025 budget implement in order to better target support for these vulnerable groups? And also, we don't just want to help them. We want to help them achieve sort of economic mobility moving forward. How can we do that, Doctor?
Well, if you notice, B40, they are quite synonyms with entrepreneurship, micro businesses. So on that note, I think perhaps enlarging more allocations for ITCAD programs, which is the microfinance for the MSME, could be a better way, because we have seen those who have been getting the funds from ITCAD has been able to demonstrate resilience in their business, be able to employ more workers, because it's quite unique in this ITCAD because it involves 3 elements. Of course, one is the microfinancing itself, and there's grants, and also a structured training being conducted by the consultants. So this structured training has helped all these B40 entrepreneurs to really look at their business model, do some re-engineering perhaps, so that we'll be able to have a better sales, have a better control in their finances. So some of them are able to, escape from this poverty trap, and yet, be able to pay the zakat to the respective state religious councils. So I think perhaps having more ITCAD allocations would be a better way to really promote social mobility among the low-income groups.
Indeed. Now, taking a look at the bigger picture, we want to also enhance Malaysia's competitiveness on the global stage.
Right.
So when we talk about that, we always look at innovations, technology. We're moving forward in the digital sphere. So how can the 2025 budget target specific sectors in order to help Malaysia's standing on the global stage and also at the same time help innovation in these areas?
Well, I think, technology sector is a very big sector, obviously, and it covers a whole range of services, a whole range of areas. And I think in Malaysian case, data centers has been the buzzwords.
Yeah.
And I think in these particular examples, I think we have that advantage. When we should harness it, I think we have seen measures being put in place in the southern region, especially establishing the special economic zones, and that actually has been quite successful in terms of garnering more investors in that particular area. So I think we need to do more in terms of telling the story to the outsiders, to the foreigners. And I think the government has done that, and we've been seeing some good traction in terms of our ringgit. So I think, it's about having a targeted areas on sectors that can have better multiplier effects to the economy.
Definitely. Okay, well, looking at that as well, how can the upcoming budget actually create a balance between, we want to attract foreign investment, of course, that's for sure, but at the same time also support these local enterprises so that they can achieve greater economic mobility, and also at the same time ensure that all Malaysians can benefit from this economic growth overall? Yeah,
I think that's the main challenge, obviously. I mean, yes, we want to accept more investment from the foreign investors, but to allow the technology transfers to happen is something that is quite challenging. And then I think perhaps having collaborations with our local universities would be a better start to allow these transfers of technology. I think we have seen this model happens in the Penang, where the E&E companies, the major ones, are having a collaborations with the USM, for instance. So perhaps we should promote this kind of collaborations between the universities and the foreign investors that can inculcate more knowledge-based discussions that can benefit our students.
Indeed. Oh, you spoke about data centers, and right now AI is also a big buzzword as well, and a lot of attention is being put towards fostering more of the youth who are interested in these sectors. And we also have a lot of students who aren't really interested in, STEM subjects, but that is like moving forward. That's the way that we should go. So what's your views on this, Doctor?
Yeah, I think beyond the monetary terms, I mean, the allocations for education sector perhaps is also to look at the software, the syllabus, what is being taught in the school, especially at the primary level. So maybe the education minister need to look at how mathematics is being taught in the primary school. What I've been hearing is that there's the difficulty level has been quite high for the students to cope, and of course we just came out from the COVID-19 shocks. So obviously the learning experience it's much different. So just imagine how we would want to encourage our students to, to love the subject.
Right.
So obviously, since we talk about AI, I think, like it or not, mathematics is something that is paramount for the student to really have a strong grasp in this subject.
Definitely. So I guess, if I'm not mistaken, what you're saying is we should put focus on like the macro matters and economic matters, but also focus on education and the small sectors as well that can ultimately lead to the growth of the nation.
Sure.
All right, Doctor. Well, with the very few minutes remaining on this final episode of this season, what would be your outlook for the upcoming budget? What do you think would be some of the big things that should be touched on and will be touched on?
Right. Actually, I'm quite sanguine about the outlook for next year in terms of the domestic economy. So I think the government should take this opportunity to continue to introduce more measures to go for more fiscal consolidations. We talk about substitutionalization. I think thus far diesel has been done, and perhaps next thing to do is RON 95. So I think this conversation has to be, has to be told to the audience, to the Rakyat. So I think this plan, this narrative has to be informed, and the government should be able to garner more buy-ins among our Rakyat. So these are very critical moment where we think the economy is doing well, but at the same time we need to make sure that the government's finances are well in place.
Definitely, definitely. And we will see on October 18th if these areas are touched on. Well, thank you so much, Doctor. Always a joy having you on the show and here on TV3 as well.
My pleasure.
A familiar face. And thank you for spending your time with us on Money Matters this week.
Right.
Well, that was Bank Muamalat Malaysia Berhad's Chief Economist, Dr. Mohd Afzanizam Abdul Rashid, here with us on Money Matters this week. Thank you so much to you who've been with us for the past half hour. You've been with us on Money Matters, but we are actually on the final episode of this season, and we're going for a short break, but do stay tuned and look out for us when we come back. If you missed the earlier part of this episode, you can also catch it up on Tonton. And until we'll see you again, I'm Azaria Tagaya. Thank you for watching and have a great weekend.